Hi everybody, I'm Anucha and I'm going to show you one of my favorite napkin rings ever. Now, napkin rings, okay, I set for every Shabbat, that is the Sabbath, the weekend, I try to set a pretty table. Doesn't always happen, but I try my best. And I have a nice collection of napkin rings because I believe that napkin rings really add a lot to a tablescape. And so I wanted to make one out of resin because I've been exploring resin a lot lately. The problem is, go and find me a napkin ring mold. So I know I couldn't find one, but then I saw this in Michael's. So this is a shot glass mold, and I was like, I could partially fill it. You see the top? I could just leave off the top, and it's basically a napkin ring. Look at that. Does that not look like a napkin ring? So it is one of my favorite ever, and check it out. Check it out. Okay, so this is actually on the Shabbat table with a beautiful color, a coral colored napkin. And oh my God, I love this so much. You can see that each one comes out truly unique. This is a somewhat beginner friendly project. I am like, because I'm sort of still not a beginner per se, but I'm not a pro, you'll find that my tutorials are more accessible for beginners. So we're taking the shot glass mold and we are popping out every single one of these sections because we are going to add gold leaf or copper leaf. Now, just a little tip. It really makes a big difference. You do want to put your copper leaf right on your mold because that will let it sit on the surface and it won't get muddied or murky. It'll just look exactly as you want. And not only do you need less of it, but it just looks nicer. It gives you that sheen that you're really going for. Now, you want to intentionally kind of crackle it a little bit and spread it around and make it random, but you're only putting it on that bottom wider portion because the other portion will be on the inside of the mold. And again, you want to center it towards the bottom, avoid the top, not totally, but just because you do want it to sort of have that abstract look, but just because you want it to stay on you want the copper leaf not to stick up, as you'll see soon. So we're mixing up our resin, and because I'm going to be speeding this up, I'm just showing you real time. We do it slowly. You want to avoid ear bubbles because they're going to be very hard to get out on this project. Now, when it's completely mixed, that's when I add my paint. I just used acrylic paint for this. Yes, you can use acrylic paint and resin. It will give you a matte, opaque look, and that is what I was going for this because it contrasts well with the copper leaf. So this is majorly sped up. Do not mix your resin this quickly. You'll get horrible ear bubbles. So the color was somewhat translucent, and I did add more acrylic paint. But this is why you wanted to completely mix your resin before, because now we are not going to completely mix it. I wanted a little bit of variation for a bit more of an organic kind of look. Sometimes with resin, a mistake that people make is that they make it too flat. Everything is just flat color. So we're avoiding that and we're partially mixing it. And you can see that there's still streaks, but I know that my resin was completely mixed beforehand. So now we're going to fill each mold. Okay, now here I made another rookie mistake. So I under measured my resin. Now the reason I did that is because I actually had made one before with extra resin to sort of measure how much I need for these napkin rings. So I thought I made enough, but I made too exact amount. You're much better off making a little bit extra and just having another mold handy to not necessarily for the same thing, but for something else. I like using jewelry molds for this. So I really sort of ran out at the end, and you can see I'm going to be sort of like scrunching it out, trying to get that last bit, because if you underfill one of these molds, it'll work, but they won't be the same size. So I started playing around with these, I forgot what they're called, tools, and trying to redistribute the resin, but I do not know how to use them. So I started just using my silicone mixer and redistributing it, and that worked a little bit better, and I was fine. I was happy. So after you do this, you're going to want to zap it with a heat gun, both to get ear bubbles out and to sort of push it towards the bottom. So one thing with this kind of mold is that you sometimes get a little bit of ear pockets. To help you avoid those ear pockets, you're going to be tapping it and scrunching it a little bit, and again, zapping it with the heat gun. And again, I will mention that you should make sure that that center is really centered and not off center, because I did have some like that. Now here's for the funnest part of every resin project. Let's pull this out of the mold. So yes, I'm going to show you taking every single one of these out of the mold. You really need to flip the whole thing inside out. I did not use any mold release or anything. So now you're going to see what I'm talking about with the copper leaf, that it sort of sticks up on the end. And you can see that my molds weren't exactly smooth and in position, but honestly, it just looks so good. It has an organic shape, and I like that. It looks handcrafted. It doesn't look sterile. So we're going to, as we take it out, just scrape off and pick off all those little extras. Because you only partially filled the mold, it didn't dome. You didn't use surface tension to sort of dome it at the top. So you're just going to, as you go along, pick it off, and we're going to sort of fix that later. Now, there are many different ways that you can fix that, and I'm going to do it one way. Honestly, I did not have a deburring tool at this point. That might have been the easiest way to do it, but frankly, the one that I got, I am just not happy with, so I'm going to have to try and get another one. So there are all our napkin rings out of the mold. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use some coarse sandpaper to help get anything that didn't just pick off with my hands off. I don't even know what grit this is. It is quite coarse. It's the kind I use to like, sort of roll into clay to give it texture. When I needed, I did use scissors to get a little more off to help shape it a little bit. And then I sanded the inside, also the inside edge, just to get the worst of those sharp edges off. The ones I didn't need it, I didn't bother. Next, I did use UV resin. I did not color. I just went with clear to create a little bit of surface tension and dome the indented end. It finishes off a little bit. You don't have to do this, especially if you have a good deburring tool and you're able to remove all those sharp edges. But I did do it, use a toothpick to get rid of some ear bubbles and to distribute it better, and then popped it under the UV lamp until it was hard. And here we go. Here is a finished napkin ring. So I'm sure you noticed that there are those tiny little micro bubbles that we would have hoped to avoid. Again, people who are better at resin than me will be able to get rid of all those micro bubbles. But as somebody who crafts these things for myself and who is an artist by nature, I like having those micro bubbles there. I like having the imperfections. I find that it just makes it so much more special. And look how beautiful that is. I'm taking the napkin, I'm pinching it from the top just to get it really thin because it is a thinner napkin ring, and these are very bulky napkins. The rust colored ones that I used on my tablescape, I'll show it to you again, are thinner and just pull right through. But these are just so pretty, and each one came out so unique. I love setting it at my table with it. It is definitely my favorite. It's my kids' favorite. A lot of times I let my kids choose the napkin ring because it has a little more color. I do have to be careful with which napkins I use it with, but it's so pretty, and I hope you'll try it as well. I did drop a link to the full tutorial, the written tutorial with a printable tutorial as well, like a recipe card style that you can print and save it for yourself if you want to remember the process. I linked that in the description. It has a link to all the craft supplies that I used, and it has loads and loads and loads of tips for you. So make sure to check that out. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, show me some support. I do so many things, and if this helped you, then the best way to thank me is just to engage, because it really does keep me creating more things like this, and my YouTube is not yet monetized, so that really does help me get there. And make sure to follow, subscribe, and all that. Check out my social channels if you like quick reels and TikToks, and enjoy!